Okay.
Oh,
Speaking of
beautiful.
which, it is 7 o'clock, and seeing as we have a few people on this webinar tonight, we will start right on track so we can all head off to bed after this is done. Firstly, thank you all for being here tonight, for joining us for this deep dive webinar with Rebecca and Nikki. I will get started with an acknowledgement of country. We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their continued connection to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. Just a little bit of webinar housekeeping. This session is recorded and will be sent out within 24 hours, along with some additional supporting resources. We would love you to interact either in the chat or Q&A if there's any questions that you'd like us to specifically address, or if there's anything that you'd like covered and we don't cover that during the webinar questions, please feel free to drop those either in the chat or the Q&A. We do also have a couple Life Skills Go staff, so if you have any questions about the Life Skills Go platform or would like to reach out about anything either as a customer or a non-customer, please feel free to pop that in the chat as well. And we'd also appreciate if you could fill out the survey towards the end of the webinar. This just helps us to refine this process and also address any topics that you might want done in the future. So thank you. I'll get started by introducing Nikki, who is the CEO and founder of Life Skills Go. She's been working within the education realm for over 20 years and has developed this emotion check-in tool among many other things. And also Rebecca, who is the principal of Prairievale Public School. Very, very grateful to have you here tonight, Rebecca. And we look forward to learning more about your school and your school's journey with wellbeing. So I might get started there. Firstly, Rebecca, I would love to know a little bit more about the context of your lovely school. So if you could give us a brief overview, basically where are you situated within New South Wales, how many students go to your school, and how long have you been using Life Skills Go?
So we are located in southwest Sydney in Bosley Park. There is around about 421 students as of today enrolled. The school is predominantly a high proportion of students from a refugee background, so we are considered what is more a disadvantaged area. We have a mainstream component of our school, so we have 15 mainstream classes and 7 classes for diverse learners who supports children from who have autism and neurodiverse or have a cognitive disability. We've been using Life Skill Goes. I think we were trying to work it out today when I was sitting there with Mary and we were talking. We think it's 4 to 3 years.
I looked it up. It's 4.
4.
I
We were
did.
like,
It's
it's 4 or 3.
4.
We couldn't go back, and we were like, which it is, because it's part of us now. So we've kind of forgotten when we started.
No, that's actually brilliant to hear. It's just become part of the normal everyday life for you guys.
Yeah, it is. We had no idea when we started. We were sitting there going, no, it was then, but we just couldn't work out. And I think because we did do a lot of work with Nikki and talking to her beforehand, so it kind of did blur that actual start date.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that and giving us a little bit of insight into your school and I guess the context around what we'll be talking about a bit later. I'd love to know before we jump in, what does well-being, student well-being specifically, mean to you at a leadership level, and why do you think it matters now more than ever?
Look, I'll be honest, if you asked me this question quite a few years ago, I wasn't that person that would have said, it means everything. But I went on my own personal wellbeing journey where I explored levels of stress in my own job and understanding the pressures of teaching and how it impacts on how we operate and how we normalize and normalize a lot of things within this profession. So once I had a greater understanding at that personal level, that's helped me understand at a leadership level for my school to be effective, for my students to operate and to be the best learners they can be, I need to support them in a holistic way. That means not just them, but their families, the parents, everyone. And we need to work in this big collaborative or supportive network so that we can all succeed in what we're doing. If our families aren't successful, if things are happening for them in their home, it flows on to the students that we serve. Then the students come not ready to learn, not with their minds open to taking content or to sit and to listen in a classroom. So we need to work in this world now where we actually have a very strong focus on wellbeing, on ourselves, on the students, and on the communities we serve, so that we can support them to be the best they can be. And that's how I feel, and that's what we have fostered in the school I work in.
And I think you make a really good point there. It's not just student wellbeing. Like when we invest in wellbeing, we take the teachers on a journey. And even, we were running a webinar recently with Dr. Mark Williams, and coming from that neuroscience point of view that, we know that young people can't learn if they're dysregulated.
No.
And, there's all these things that we know now. But again, as you said, it's like, whichever point you come in at as part of your journey, it's kind of, I think you end up, the school comes along with you, and I've seen that, with you, but also that it's a point in time where we're recognizing that actually so much can't happen. Connection can't happen. Leadership can't happen. And I just feel great joy when I hear you on your journey with your school and talking about that, particularly coming from the top through your team. So I just thought I'd jump in there. I just kind of went.
All right.
No, that was perfect. And I think thank you for being honest as well about, I guess, your own journey that you've been on. And I think as adults, there's so much still that we have to learn. And yeah.
Sometimes we come into this mindset, or you just get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you can't get on with it. And we do it as teachers. We say, but they should listen. Sometimes they can't listen. Their brains aren't ready for listening. So, unless we have this focus, unless we have an understanding of what it means now, and especially in today's society, we're not going to shift. We're not going to see this great success that we want to see in our learners.
Yeah, definitely. And no, I think it's great hearing the journey that you went on specifically from a leadership perspective. What I'd love to know is, how did you make sure that this wasn't just a leadership vision, but something owned across classrooms and, as you mentioned, across your community as well?
Look, I was fairly lucky. We had done a lot of work prior to stepping on to Life Skill Go. So we did a lot of work around understanding behaviour, understanding antecedents, understanding functions of behaviour, but then also understanding zones of regulation, how you come, how you present. Having that diverse learner unit in my school did also help. So I had a lot of professionals already, those amazing educators in there with high-level skill around this specific area, and they became what I would probably say is my flag bearers. So, I didn't go in there and say with my executive team, hey, we want to do this. We talked about it as an executive level, of course. We bombarded Nikki. Nikki came out. We did a lot of work to understand the program and to understand what it could do for us contextually. We had already been working with those zones and understanding emotions, context of emotions, and we didn't have the data sources. We didn't have those things that helped us to go that next step of, well, then once we know where these kids are, how they're feeling, what now? We were kind of just asking them and then stopping. So we knew we had to build and go to that next step. So we really went back to our staff. We did a lot of talking about, what do they think? We understood their feelings around it. And we found that we did have a collective understanding. It was very similar. So we all had this similar sort of point of view where we were like, yeah, but it's not really going anywhere. We're asking these kids, how are you feeling? We're having these conversations, but we're not able to see over time. We're not able to see trends. We're not able to see, where if there's similarities in siblings, and we felt limited in what we were doing and we weren't seeing the great impact. So we were like, we then went into a couple of meetings. We talked about, well, what if we had this? We'd already spoke to Nikki, so we knew what the answers to the what if were. We knew what the system could do. So we knew, what we could do with life skills goals and what the benefits are going to be. But we wanted the teachers and our staff to feel like they were empowered in making those decisions, and it was coming from them. So we wanted them to come up with it. And as soon as they would make a statement or come up with this bright idea, would go, well, there's this system. So, and then we started to play. Then we got Nikki out. We played in for a while. We got to see it. We also, with our staff, we didn't dictate. So I didn't say, you must implement it this way. That first year, we wanted them to have ownership, and we wanted to make it successful for them in their classrooms. So we said, all right, these are ways you could implement it. We talked about ideas. We did a lot of brainstorming as a collective staff. But then we allowed them to have the autonomy to make those decisions within their rooms with their students, because we also respect them as professionals. They know their kids best. I don't know their kids and how they're going to cope in that environment. It's sensitive sometimes in discussing your feelings, especially when we're on that initial journey of learning. So we wanted them to have that autonomy to make those decisions. So the whole process with the staff was very collaborative, very teacher decision making. It was from their perspective opposed to my perspective as the leader in the school. We did do, yes, a lot of, flipping in this is the tool that we had. And ultimately they were quick to come on board, and we didn't have any issues at all, or hesitancy, or struggles in implementation. There was zero. Everyone took it on with not any kind of issues in or feeling that it wasn't worthwhile.
Can I just jump in there, Lucia? Sorry. I mean, one of the things I want to say to you, Rebecca, is watching you and your executive team and your rollout and your implementation, and watching, you were really a school that we onboarded and off you went. And, and not every school has to be like that. So for those schools that, we are there and we're really there to wrap support around. But I remember asking you initially, what was it you did? Like, you just literally, your school was on board and you and your executives were just like full steam ahead, and, just this incredible rollout. And you said, we've done, as you said here tonight, a lot of work on really unpacking emotions and doing a lot of work. So that led us down another path about 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, of really making sure that we had access to explicitly teaching emotions on the platform, making sure that if there were teachers, if they didn't have access to that kind of professionals that could deliver that in the school, that was also packaged in, because you were really a school that stood out for us, not only the way that your leadership within the school, but also how quick you were to implement, embed, and it just became part of the school. And I just want to say thank you from us, because particularly in those early days, we were watching you, and, hence all the questions I was asking you at the time, like, how do we support this and how do we share this with other schools? So that's definitely been a huge part of what we took on, was to hire people and to make sure that we could have that for other schools too, if they didn't have those resources internally. So I just want to say thank you.
That's all right. And I was lucky. I do have a really strong executive team with very strong moral purpose, very strong aligned views. We also had done a lot of work as a staff around wellbeing, not the tokenistic, morning teas. We're not doing those. We did a lot of work around wellbeing goals and setting those as a team, having shared goals, working as teams to understand each other's narratives, how your narrative and wellbeing align, so that we had a really strong understanding around what wellbeing was and how it impacts you as an individual, and then understanding the benefits from that individual perspective. The same journey I went on, we did that as a staff to then transfer over into our students. So look, it sounds like it was a really long time, but it wasn't. We're fast at Prairievale. It didn't take long. And, while it kind of, they work together. So why we were working with Nikki to understand, to set it up, to have that deeper understanding of what Life Skill Goes could do for us and how it could be used within our school, we were doing all these things on the side in preparation. So they were working together, and that made it a lot easier, because when we did on board, we were already on track. We were ready to go.
It's so brilliant to hear. And I think just recognizing the fact that there was a lot of other work you were doing in conjunction with it. It's really good stuff. And I suppose what I'm wondering now is, seeing as you've been using the platform for quite a while, 3.5, 4 years, I was wondering if you could describe a time when it became clear that well-being had become woven into daily school life. Was there a turning point?
Trying to think of when you felt it. See, it's just part of our practice now. Look, I think when we started, when all the new data set came out, that was really fantastic. I have to say that was taking it to the next level. And that, I think it probably was around that time, because we actually worked out as a school that there were so many possibilities that you could do with this system. We understood that when we were actually tracking families and we were looking at siblings, for instance, there was a situation where we had 2 siblings that were coming to school, and we were looking at how they were checking in and the context that they were checking in. Sad, angry, at home. Both siblings, different check-ins in the motion sense, but it was both happening at home. And we watched that for a couple of days just to see. We were doing the check-ins with the teachers, but we were looking at, well, what's going on? We then spoke to the teacher, and we found that unfortunately there was some domestic violence happening in that home. And those kids were, going through a little bit of a struggle, but we were able to put supports in and really support that family as a whole through the use of that system, which then changed how they were in the classroom, because these kids weren't coming to school dysregulated. They weren't coming to school. And I think those little elements that we found over time, where we were able to be responsive beyond any means that we'd ever been responsive before, I think that was the turning point when we realized, this system actually allows you to see things that you would have missed in the past. We wouldn't have picked that up until probably later on, and maybe not at all. Through these kids checking in, we were able to see that, look, this child needs support, that I can give you 1,000 more situations like that, where our responsiveness of a school had increased through the system, and that allowed us to be better support networks for our families and the communities that were served, but also to help these little kids come to school and be the best people that they can, to learn. And that was the shift. I think that was the turning point when we realized that.
Can I just ask, what is that like? What does it look like now? So how many times, do you have because every school works differently, and we always get asked, what's normal? And I'm like, well, normal's a dial on a washing machine, really.
Yeah.
For data integrity and for trustworthy data, we always say a minimum of 3 times a week. And yet I'm up here in Newcastle at the moment, and they're so it's like, no, we do, blah, and I won't go into it because I don't want people to benchmark it. But what do you do in your school? Like, what's the requirement, or do you let every class, do it as they wish? How do you do that?
Teachers are doing it individually. So our staff have that, like I said, we've kept autonomy with them. We don't want to dictate to them. We want them to be owning this, and we want them to feel confident with this. So that's one of our non-negotiables, to leave that autonomy with our highly skilled, great staff. They will pin certain students to allow them to any concerns that they will see. So that allows them to check. They essentially will do it regularly. It depends with them, and it depends on the individual teacher. At our level, we use the data for various different reasons. So how we're extracting that data and looking at that data can depend on the context of why we're using it. So, for example, attendance, no, we wouldn't do that frequently. every day. We might do it, sometimes we'll do that weekly or fortnightly. So we do it alongside our attendance tracking. So what we do is we compare the kids that are arriving late to the kids that are checking in that are tired, and seeing if there's correlation between that and the context of where it is. And then we're able to have more informed conversations with the parents or the students, and talk about how we can make plans that are going to be more effective and more supportive of their needs. If we're sitting at home on our devices all night and then tired, we can put those plans in place. For wellbeing data, Mary does it often, usually for learning support meetings. They give her further insight. So that would be weekly. So like I said, it's very dependent. We don't have a fixed rule. And we've lived by that because we want the system to be responsive to our needs. So where, depending on that context, we will adjust how we use it, what we do with it to support us. And because it has so many functionalities that can be used across multiple areas of what you do in schools and how you in your operations, the flexibility is why it works for us.
I love that answer. Like sitting in the room today with a whole network of schools who are all using it, and I think everyone has different ideas, and I think it's wonderful to hear how it works in your school. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know you briefly just touched on the impact of the data and also just shared a story, but my next question is focused on recalling a time when the Life Skills Go data meant you could respond faster and more accurately than you could have before using it.
Look, I did talk about that situation, but then I can talk about just recently, and again with the attendance. So we just recently did a presentation for the executive director around attendance and looking at our attendance tracking over time. So we used our Life Skill Go data to then correlate it with or triangulate it with our attendance data. And we found that actually there was a direct correlation between the students that were arriving late to school, checking in tired at school. So it was actually a high population. So we were able to see, and then we were able to look at the context. So it was, it gave us a lot of the times when we had our students, they arrived late at school. We said, "Why are you late?" And they say, "I slept in." You go, "Yeah, great, good, thanks." Put it down, you write it, and on they go. And, with these check-in, we were able to go, okay, look, let's now go work with these students and have a little bit of a deeper, I'll use this, a deeper dive into their attendance, like into their, what's happening? Why are why are you tired? You're checking in tired. So you're tired. You're late to school. What's causing this tired? You said online. Okay, what are we doing online? How can we set some boundaries at home? And then we can also have those conversations with the parents and make them the attendance meetings that we have, or that, those where we're planning some strategies to have improved attendance. They can have more information to it. We already go in prepared with, information to work with these students, and it makes it a lot more effective. It also saves a lot of time in the end.
I guess it just gives you, as you said, a little bit more information, a little bit more factual data around that to be able to have those more informed discussions.
That's right. We were able to even, so as a school, earlier on in our Life Skill Goes journey, we found through our check-in that our families were going through a lot of financial difficulties. So increased check-ins with sadness at home, not feeling upset, sad, tired. When we dug deeper into that and we looked at the data from that, and we did a lot of work with students to understand the context and why, and we found that the financial struggles of our families were actually impacting on our students, and they were checking in as that. So that allowed us to then be responsive. So we created community pantry within the school. So we provide our families with free access to free food, which then allowed them to have sort of, it was food and pantry items, everything. So then it started to at least take some financial pressure off, We also, looked at what we were doing in a school in a financial sense around how we offer, additional extracurricular, and we looked at how we can fund that as a school. So now we fund 100% of our extracurricular to provide, that to take away that pressure. But the Life Skill Goes gave us that information from the students checking in and us being able to have those conversations with those students and to find out, mum and dad are struggling. They weren't able to do this. And, if we offer this, and we supply to a regular group of families on a regular, every week they come in, they get a box food, and they can also take whatever else they need. But that came from the Life Skill Go data. And now our kids actually come to school with lunches. We also do a lunch program so we can eliminate those challenges in the home while mum and dad get back on their feet. And that's what I was kind of saying before at the first question when I said it's about holistic support. It doesn't just stop with the child. The child takes on the stress from the home. They come with their little backpack full of struggles. And through the data we were able to go, okay, these are some of the struggles that we're seeing. How can we do this? How can we work with external agencies, support networks? How can we seek all these different things to be able to do this within our school to get our parents back on track so that our kids are great, learners who are ready to learn, that their heads don't come filled with adult worries because they've heard mum and dad that last night, but they come ready to take on that content of the day or that learning that's going to happen.
I think there's, we had the privilege of having Sharon Healy from AXO on a webinar one night, and she said, when a young person enrolls in school, they come as a package, you get the community. And so it gives me goosebumps even just saying that, actually. To hear you recognize and to, it's really refreshing, because I think, I was going to ask you that question, how would you have known before? And I know your answer, well, you wouldn't. You just wouldn't. And I think in a time that we're in now, we used to talk about the complexity, or, it's a really complex time. It's not going to get any easier. But that community support and that connection to our families, and those families feeling that the school is that place that they can come to and they are supported, because there are so many services, if we can allow that ability. And, I'm just sitting here going, I really want you on one of our AXO websites, our AXO ones, because it is, it's not just a child, it is the whole family. And being able to, I often get asked, how would you describe Life Skills Go? And it's really hard, because having real-time data that will pick up on trends, metrics, and allow you, to understand what's happening for the student, but also the class and the school, and then it'll provide you this, as you would say, this beautiful data and beautiful reporting. But at the end of the day, we're in the business of relationships, teaching, learning, and also, well-being needs to come first. And how do we begin to extend that into the community, and particularly a complex community that I imagine that you've got too, of so many different people. And I think you've just summed up very much, what Life Skills Go can help schools to do, and remove those barriers and remove sometimes those really difficult conversations that a family might find really hard to have with a school. But they're really important conversations, that the doors are always open to have those conversations.
And the kids give you that little pathway in, and you can do it. You can do it as softly and help. And I think every educator, every school will say the same thing now. Our jobs are a lot more complex. We are often, when everything else is congested, they're access to allied health professionals, pediatricians, health services, all those things, or even welfare organisations, when they're congested, schools are the thing that keeps on going, and we're the ones that keep supporting. And that is the best thing about schools. We are these amazing places that support the communities around us and the students that come to us. So having Life Skill Go allowed us to have a lot more information with that, and to be able to target specifically what we need rather than playing the guessing game. And I think that is a really important factor. We were able to go, look, we have the data now. We know it. So, there was no more wondering or thinking moments, we knew because it was there. And that allowed us to target more effectively, make better financial decisions, support the students, support our families, and be responsive like we should be.
Oh, you've made me feel incredibly. I've had goosebumps 3 times tonight, Rebecca. This 3 times. Sorry, Lucia.
No, you don't need to say sorry. I also have goosebumps actually, and thank you for sharing so much, Rebecca. I think it's these kind of conversations that also need to be had around well-being, and I think focusing on that community aspect leads us quite well into the next question, which is also about the school community. So I'd love to know, how did you ensure that the proactive approach of using Life Skills Go was reaching both your mainstream and support classes?
Our support classes, I'm going to be honest, were probably the easiest. The diverse learners were the easiest implementation. Because they do work, a lot of our diverse learners work in that therapy area, they had already come with some, foundational skills. The fact that Life Skill Goes also allows you to customize. So you don't just go in there and say everyone has to do this blanket, set of emotions. Everyone's got the same, one size shoe fits all. It doesn't do that. We were able to customize it to the specific needs of every class, including the diverse learners. So with our kindergarten cohorts in our diverse learners are still learning those emotions, still understanding, well, what does happy look like? What does sad look like? Understanding those key emotions before we even get into context, we were able to customize that specifically for our diverse learners and then build from there. That's why they were probably very easy, because it was at their point of need. And I think that's the important factor that you've got to, when you're implementing, and probably why we were successful with Nikki, we were straight up. We did do a lot of discussions around that, not just, knowing your kids, know your students, know how they learn and know what they can cope with, and then move from there. So, making sure that when we're setting up for those individual classes, what we're putting on for them to be able to work, to choose from or to look at, was what they specifically understand. And then we build from there. We keep going up and teaching once they have that understanding.
I often have this, what would it look like if we turned learning support around and had them sort of running like the school and wellbeing? Like, imagine if we could, there's such wealth of incredible skills, and I have this big dream of like, imagine if they were running mainstream for just even a term, just one term, to be, because that is the business they're in, I think that ease of particularly teaching emotional literacy and self-regulation and all, it's the foundation a lot of the time. And I often wonder what that would look like. That's just my little kind of,
Look, our neurodiverse kids were the ones that were coming up in the playground and telling you that, such and such, he was sad today because he did this. And, today, look, we did know who in what class was, happy, sad, angry, like whatever. You knew it by the end of lunch, because the kids do talk about it. That was probably another thing as well. We didn't do anything secret in our classrooms. Like, there wasn't much. The teachers took on more of an open classroom and a supportive, where they checked in, and they checked in as a collective, talking to one another and talking about that. I'm not 100% sure. I can't answer directly to you, like, why they took on that. I think that it was just something that it happened in our context. So it's been really beneficial, because now we're seeing that flow-on effect where the kids are understanding, that social emotional aspect, and they're understanding. Like today, there was an example where we have a student who's having some trouble with making some bad choices. The 2 little boys said, I asked him to play because I know it's because he wants friends. And that high level of social emotional understanding is coming through now, through hearing them each other talk, through hearing each other, check in and talk about emotion as not a dirty word. It's not a negative thing, as something that we all have, and it's part of life and it impacts us, and that's okay, because then we problem solve out. And, taking that shared responsibility in that is supporting, the whole context, and you can see the implications on the students and how they're responding to one another.
And it sounds like they've got a lot of empathy for each other.
He did. Oh, look, it was amazing. And just, and that's just one story, but it was amazing. He recognized through hearing those check-ins, it was just that he was craving for friends. So I thought I would try something different. I gave friends. And then now this doesn't happen. And, this and this doesn't happen. We were like, yes, because, you showed that you were, empathy towards your peer. You understood, you listened to their feelings and emotions, and you recognized something. So we're seeing, a shift in them as young people and how they respond to each other.
And if we could bottle that, like I often think that collective we as adults get in the way when we're looking at something like this. There's always the questions that the team always gets asked is, do they have to like turn around when the other person's checking in so that the students don't see the emotion? Or when we're implementing this, is it going to be really hard for the young people to identify how they're feeling? Or should we do it all privately and not let anyone see? And it's very hard as providers, and this is why I'm so grateful and thank you for giving your time, because we can give the evidence base on, literally your story that we tell is like 101 sequential kind of, if you do this and you do this, you develop a whole group of empathy and you get people understanding, and emotional literacy becomes part of your fabric. And I wonder if we are the blockers because we weren't brought up with that. We weren't, how are you? Fine. What's happening?
I think we are the blockers, and I think we do make a lot of excuses. And I think we put a lot of barriers in place for ourselves, because even as a school at the start, one of the things that we were hesitant about was that our community is still, developing their understanding around mental health and wellbeing. And we, it's a topic that is not always accepted, and we're still building that understanding and acceptance. And we thought we were putting that as a barrier at the start. And in the end, it didn't even come into play. It wasn't even, our community were totally on board. When we bring it up, when we have meetings with parents, we bring up their check-ins and we talk about them. There's not any hesitation when we've done work with our community around Life School Goes and what we're using it for and how, and, the social emotional learning, they were fine. So we instilled the barriers. We were the ones that put that in place. We were the ones that said, no, it's not going to work but we didn't actually have the concrete proof, or we didn't really have any definitive understanding. It was just something we created. So we definitely do put barriers up.
Yeah, but I think it's like calling it out because, again, we weren't taught this. We also didn't have the neuroscience, the evidence, the brain, like we didn't have, neuroplasticity. We didn't have any of that when we were at school, and our parents didn't talk about emotions or feelings. Like it just wasn't a thing. And now we know so much about the brain, and we know so much about why social emotional learning is so critical for all young learners or any learners. But today I was just sitting there thinking, I wonder if we're the blocker. So I thought I'd try out my hypothesis with you tonight, because
one of the things, and I think one of the things that work well with us, talking about like the time now and research, because we all know research says that if children's wellbeing is supported, they're going to learn better. We know that. But we also did a lot of work talking to our parents around the pace and complexity of challenges these days, like bullying. I'm 46, so when I was younger, I got to go home and have a break. So if I had a fight with someone at school, I got to go home and had a break, and I had to sit there and I had to wait for mum to finish watching a country practice or what was ever on TV, because I didn't have devices.
On our four channels.
With four channels and lots of ads that I couldn't fast forward. So, there was patience. There was all these wonderful things. But I did get an escape, and I got a level of calmness. Children today don't have that. they go home to someone who can connect with them very quickly, and connecting with them can end up really challenging, can be very toxic. The way they do that can be horrific sometimes. So these young people are experiencing things that are very different to what we were sort of brought up and how we lived in that earlier years. So we do need to change and have that higher focus.
And I think that, particularly if we come back to pace and we come back to complexity, and I think those, talking about schools becoming a center hub as well, like if we are beginning to, it becomes the fabric of beginning to identify or teach young people how to identify, communicate, and manage their emotions. They are beginning to learn those tools of, you said, patience, like everything's so fast, everything comes through. So that ability to be able to deal with their world, hence why, it is really critical that we are teaching these things. But
Yeah,
I
how
think
do I
sometimes
slow
we,
down?
like literally slow down. Sorry, Lucia. Oh, see, we're just being, okay, sorry, Rebecca.
Sorry. I just that I would jump in. This discussion is so good and so useful. And I think overall what I'm hearing is a recognition. I want to say, I don't think you guys are the blockers. But I think what is amazing is that you're recognizing that the contemporary issues that young people are facing these days sometimes need contemporary solutions. And
Right.
that is what life skills go can be in some contexts. So, props to you guys for Nikki obviously coming up with the concept, and Rebecca for implementing it so well, and having that ability to provide that opportunity for a different kind of technology connection to give us helpful and useful information. I will wrap us up with a final question. Rebecca, I'd love to know overall, why do you think that having a whole school real-time um, data-informed well-being approach is no longer optional, but essential?
I think everything that we've talked about here around those changes, your pace and the complexity of challenges, what our kids face now is nothing like we've ever imagined. And, that what they are exposed to, what they see, the lack of, slowness in their life. Everything is so fast paced. They are flicking through one thing to the next. Choice is at their fingertips. They don't need to wait. They don't need to slow down because everything can come to them so quickly, but with that has very negative impacts, that brings increased anxiety, increased, attention deficits. You've got increased access to bullying, inappropriate content. All of these other, sort of negative components come with how we operate now in that, what you said, contemporary society. So we need to have a really strong wellbeing program to be able to cope with that. Young minds aren't developed. They're not ready to be or equipped to be able to manage that. So we have to be responsive as educators to be able to support them in that wellbeing lens, to support those developing brains, to give them those skill sets, those toolbox, fill up their little toolbox so that they can cope and progress in their years. And then alongside that, become really competent, active learners. You're not going to get the learning without the well-being. It's simple as that. So, we need to have them both working side by side. It's not hard. It's not something complex. It's so simple. And I think once you start working in the system and you see the impact you find and you feel the simplified nature of it, and you realize that something that can appear to be very complex and unreachable actually isn't. And, very simple steps can make, really big impact. The ripple effect, little things, big ripples. So, we really do have to understand the time that we're working in and the complexities of these young learners or people, and how working with systems like this allow us to be more responsive and supportive so that we can get the greatest impact on what we're trying to achieve. And for me, it's learning. So I need to know my kids are right, ready, and, you know, settled in that class. Their minds are free and ready to take in that learning for the day.
That was beautifully put, and I think summarizes a lot of what we've spoken about tonight. I firstly just want to say thank you both for joining us, and I'll hand over to Nikki to wrap up tonight's discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Lucia. And Rebecca, thank you so much. And thank you to your school and everyone there that has also helped us grow. You know, we always say that we exist not only to ensure that no child falls through the gaps, but we're here to be supporting you and making sure that we're lifting and providing a service of things that you don't need to do so that you can begin to do, you know, have visibility and do, you know, have great learners in your classroom as well. I just want to thank Lucia. Again, Lucia mentioned that we'll be sending out this recording, and I want to thank everyone who attended tonight, or if you're passing this on to other people or other schools, please feel free to reach out to us if we can support you any possible way. And Rebecca, if you've got any suggestions or if your team's got any ideas of what you'd like next, please always, as usual, send through, because we're always here looking at how we can improve. And I look forward to, I think I'm going to have to come out and do a little site visit now. I've realised it's been 4 years. It's like, where did the years go? Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm really, really grateful. And thank all your team as well.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.